2021, more than ever, was a year of resilience, and in Brazil, it was no different. 2021 was the most troubling year of the COVID-19 pandemic in Brazil so far, with death tolls outstripping those of last year by some distance. 2020 saw a total of 204,800 deaths from the coronavirus, but this year, that total was already matched by May. But how did the most intense period of the pandemic affect the country? Welcome to the first episode of Brazil Rewind, a mini-series recapping the stories that defined Brazil in 2021. Today, an overview of the second year of the COVID-19 pandemic. Infection rates were increasing steadily at the start of 2021, with specialists warning that Brazil was on the verge of a full-scale health crisis. But the situation was already catastrophic in the city of Manaus, where images like these were plastered on the front pages of newspapers around the world. At the same time, President Jair Bolsonaro doubled down on his opposition to lockdowns and social distancing, instead promoting hydroxychloroquine as an efficient method for treating COVID, despite a total lack of proof. It's no surprise that the pandemic affected poorer communities more than the rich. In the first quarter of 2021, the number of poor people multiplied by 3.5 times compared to 2019, with about 25 million people falling below the poverty line. And black women were affected most by deteriorating economic conditions, more than any other demographic. The pandemic only reached its first peak this year around March, when death rates doubled. But by that time, Brazil had already begun giving out its first vaccines, and supplies began arriving in greater numbers. When looking at the data, it's clear that vaccines played a key role in containing the pandemic. Criticised for opposing vaccines and delaying purchases, Bolsonaro declared at the end of March that actions at the beginning of the pandemic were what ensured Brazil's vaccination. In April, the Senate opened an inquiry into the Bolsonaro government's mismanagement of the pandemic. By the end of the process, senators requested the indictment of 80 people and companies, including Bolsonaro himself. By August, as more and more Brazilians received their second vaccine doses, cases began decreasing. Now, at the end of the year, Brazil has a higher share of fully immunised adults than the US, the United Kingdom, and several European countries. Cases are also at their lowest level since January. As was the case around the world, the COVID-19 pandemic has changed the way Brazilians interact, consume, and work. In education, the National University Entry Exam had its lowest participation in history, mostly due to the impact of the pandemic on Brazilian education. And as 2022 comes around, could we finally say that we're entering the post-pandemic era? Experts say no, especially after the arrival of the Omicron variant, which could evade protections from existing vaccines. With that, and an election on the way, there is much to be discussed in Brazil in 2022. If you want to keep up to date with this and other stories, check out Brazilian.report. Like, share, and subscribe for more videos on everything Brazil.